Shana Tova, Gemar Chatima Tova, or Zarua on this day of Yom Kippur. As always, it is a special honor and privilege to share my thoughts with you, to speak of matters of both the mind and the heart. Today, I share with you a set of questions that both puzzle me and remain unanswered for me. These are questions that I have discussed for several high holiday seasons now, and still no answer. I continue to grapple with this topic. I search, I struggle, I yearn for clarity, but still, I'm not sure. So what is the matter to which I'm referring here? It is the subject of God. Does God exist? And if so, what is God? Who is God? And how do we describe God or a God force in our lives? How many of you here remember Art Linkletter and his famous show, House Party? House Party was a talk show that aired back in the day from 1952 to 1969. Some of us, many on the screen, were not even born yet, and others of us were just little kids when the show aired. Undoubtedly, the best part of the show was when Art Linkletter would interview those adorable children lined up on their tall chairs, and the kids, in their innocence, would say the funniest things. Based on these interviews, Linkletter wrote his very famous book, Kids Say the Darndest Things, first published in 1959 and reprinted many times thereafter. The first Reconstructionist rabbi that I ever met, back when I was a student at Penn, Rabbi Sid Schwartz, compared Linkletter's book, Kids Say the Darndest Things, to another famous book, Children's Letters to God, written 7 years later in 1966 by authors Eric Marshall and Stuart Hampel. Children's Letters to God has a similar flavor to Linkletter's book, but whereas Linkletter talked with children about all kinds of topics, Marshall and Hampel's book consists strictly of children's letters with comments to or questions for God. According to one reviewer, quote, whether posing a question, begging a favor, or expressing doubt or joy, the letters in this book are notable for their refreshing directness, unexpected humor, and startling clarity of thought. This book is like seeing the world through a child's bright eyes, untouched by cynicism, eyes brimming with innocence, wonder, and curiosity. In his 2007 sermon entitled, What's God Got to Do with It?, Rabbi Sid Schwartz, the same rabbi who was the first Reconstructionist rabbi I met, shares some of his favorite excerpts from Children's Letters to God. As you can see, I recently purchased the book. Once when I tried to get it, I could not get it at all. It was just seemed like it was unattainable, but here I have it. So I recently purchased the book, and here are Rabbi Schwartz's favorites with a few added by me. Dear God, thank you for the baby brother, but what I prayed for was a puppy. Joyce. Maybe Cain and Abel wouldn't kill each other so much if they had their own rooms. It works with my brother. Larry. We read in school that Thomas Edison made light, but in Sunday school they said you did it. I bet he stole your idea. Donna. My brother told me about being born, but it doesn't sound right. Marcia. I would like to live 900 years like the guy in the Bible. Chris. I like the story about Hanukkah the best of all of them. You really made up some good ones. Glenn. And Anita, instead of letting people die and having to make new ones, why don't you just keep the ones you got now? Pretty awesome notes to God by these wise and inquisitive young ones, don't you think? Clearly, these children see God as a higher authority in charge of the inner workings and mysteries of life. Children ask deep questions and want to make sense of the world, just like we do. So let's take a moment to pause and think. If you had the opportunity to write a letter to God, what would you ask? And who is the God to whom you would be writing? Think about the God concept with which you grew up. Many, dare I say most of us, grew up with the concept of a God who was omniscient, omnipotent, and who was most definitely male. This God was all-powerful and could answer our prayers, send healing to those who are ill, and could intervene in and alter the course of worldly occurrences. But for most of us, as we continue to grow, our experience of life and the world with illness, natural disasters, despair, and evil just couldn't support the existence of this type of all-powerful God. And for most of us, we started to ask the question, what is God? Who is God? Is there a God? If you've asked these questions, you are in good company. Great writers, theologians, and scholars, both secular and Jewish, have questioned the existence and nature of God for years and years. Approximately a century ago, the founder of Reconstructionism, Mordechai Kaplan, rejected these same conventional supernatural assumptions about God with which many of us grew up. Kaplan was born in 1881 in Lithuania. His early education was strictly Orthodox, but by the time he reached secondary school, he was attracted to alternative religious views, particularly regarding a literal approach to God and to the Bible. Kaplan rejected a belief in a supernatural God who could suspend laws of nature, speak to human beings, or micromanage the world. But instead of completely throwing away the concept of God, Kaplan reconstructed the meaning of God, maintaining that, quote, God is a force in the universe or an aspect of reality through which human beings can fulfill themselves, both ethically and spiritually. Kaplan affirmed that God is not personal and that all anthropomorphic descriptions of God are, at best, imperfect metaphors. Regarding Torah, Kaplan rejected the idea that the Torah is the immutable word of God given to Moses at Mount Sinai that must be believed and observed literally. Instead, Kaplan maintained that, quote, the Torah is a record of the Jewish people's search for God or for ultimate truth. Kaplan believed that for 3,000 years, the rabbis of the tradition have added their wisdom and insights into words that were believed to be God's. We are the beneficiaries of that wisdom, regardless of how the Torah was originally written. We are challenged to study and apply that wisdom to the personal and societal challenges that we face every day. So it is very important to emphasize that Kaplan, the founder of Reconstructionist Judaism, disagreed with the fundamentalist literal view of an all-powerful God and the idea that the Torah was divinely written. Kaplan saw the Torah as being written by our ancestors to reflect their concept of the divine, which centered around their experiences of the mysterious and transcendent in their lives. What I admire about Mordechai Kaplan is that instead of completely throwing the baby out with the bathwater or abandoning Judaism, Kaplan undertook the enterprise of reconstructing it. His Judaism retained the roots of his upbringing in terms of traditions, rituals, and prayers that gave meaning to life, but he rejected the idea of the Torah as divinely written, rejected the idea of the Jews as the chosen people, and importantly for our discussion, rejected the idea of a micromanaging God. In reconstructing the Orthodox Judaism in which he was raised, Kaplan created a paradigm in which future generations of Jews, all of us, could continue the faith of our ancestors and find within Judaism both belief and practice that could make sense and meaning in our contemporary lives, and live with a concept of God that matches with our experience of the world. So where do you stand? Do you believe in God? Rabbi Sid Schwartz reflects, for most of my rabbinate, I have taught that the all too repeated question, do you believe in God, is just a lousy question. In James Fowler's classic book, Stages of Faith, Fowler proposes 6 stages of faith development, from the most childish and basic, level 1, to the most sophisticated and nuanced, level 6. Fowler observes that few people ever reach the higher stages. The do you believe in God question is a level 1 to 2 question. It asks whether one believes in a personal supernatural God and thus sets up an either or proposition. Either you believe in a supernatural God or you're an atheist. This is where so much of the religious discourse in the world is stuck, says Rabbi Schwartz. Reconstructionism is a belief system that falls into higher categories of Fowler's model of faith development. The operative question for Reconstructionists is not, do you believe in God, but rather, when do you have an experience of God, of something divine, holy, or bigger than you? By asking the question, when do you have an experience of God, an experience that feels divine, holy, spiritual, or transcendent, Rabbi Schwartz turns the fundamentalist view of God on its head and shifts the paradigm completely. I love this. Reconstructionist Rabbi Toba Spitzer, author of the book, God is Here, Reimagining the Divine, reflects, quote, "What I've come to understand in recent years is that the God problem that so many people have, the difficulty of believing or even taking seriously the notion of some kind of all-powerful, all-knowing being that interacts with us in mysterious ways, is not really a problem with God. Rather, it's a reaction to a metaphor or a set of metaphors that our ancestors used for God." She continues, "When I use the word metaphor, I don't just mean a literary turn of phrase. The more we learn about the human brain, the more we understand that metaphor is fundamental to how human beings understand and talk about many things, especially the more abstract things in our lives, like emotions, feelings, relationships, experiences, the things that we really can't put into words. Metaphorical expressions like, I'm boiling mad, or everything is turned upside down, my heart is full, I love you to the moon and back, are metaphors that we use to express our emotions and experiences because we just can't describe certain things with words. Spitzer explains that years ago, our ancestors employed a rich palette of metaphors to express their experience of the divine, metaphors that spoke directly to their everyday experiences in the time and culture in which they were living. Just like us, the writers of Torah and then the rabbis lived in a world that had great uncertainty and fear, and like us, they were trying to make sense of their world. In an uncertain world, they yearned for comfort and safety, and so the metaphor of God as Father, Parent, and King emerged to encapsulate an entity to which our ancestors could turn with the fears and dangers of life. Likewise, our ancestors lived in a world like we do, with natural splendor and beauty, and moments of awe and gratitude for this abundant glory in the world, and thus metaphors of God as Almighty, Creator, source of all, emerged to acknowledge the beauty and natural wonders of the world. The truth is that the Torah and rabbinic tradition use hundreds of names and metaphors for God. I have a sheet right here with, I don't know, I didn't count how many, but this whole long paragraph is different names of God used in Torah and used in our texts. Metaphor, metaphor, and more metaphor. Spitzer maintains that the language used in these metaphors were right, fitting, and appropriate for the time of our ancestors, but most of them no longer feel meaningful for us today. These metaphors fit well for their time, but today, as Spitzer says, have become extinct. Both believers and non-believers have forgotten that our holy texts are full of these metaphors, all created in order to provide a way of looking at and being in both a glorious and uncertain world, and for trying to explain that which could not be explained. Rabbi Spitzer continues, there are usually two results that can come from taking a religious metaphor literally. We either become fundamentalists, trying to apply teachings and imagery from thousands of years ago to a radically different world today, or we reject the entire religious enterprise, deeming it unreal and unbelievable. But Rabbi Spitzer suggests that there is another way, somewhere between religious fundamentalism and complete atheism. And that way is to re-embrace metaphor and begin a project of reconceptualizing what we've known as God. It is very curious to note that one of the names of God used in Torah is a name that is actually intended not to be spoken. it is this 4-letter name of God, Yud-He, Vav-He. This name is all breath and cannot be pronounced. It has no vowels. Those of other religions have tried to pronounce it as Yahweh or Jehovah, but we as Jews are told not to even try to pronounce it. Because it has no vowels, it really can't be spoken. When this appears in Torah, Yud-He, Vav-He, and we chant Torah, we don't even chant it. We say Adonai or Elohim instead. Why have a name for God that appears over and over again that was never intended to be spoken? The great Torah and Hasidic scholar and master, Rabbi Art Green, explains, with a name like Yud-He, Vav-He, it seems as if the writers of Torah were trying to keep things as open as possible when it came to conceptualizing the divine. Additionally, when Moshe encounters God at the burning bush and asks God's name, God replies with the words, Eheyeh asher eheyeh, I will be what I will be. I love this name, which implies that God is always evolving, shifting, and becoming. Don't try to pin me down, God is saying to Moshe. Eheyeh asher eheyeh, I will be what I will be. I am always becoming and evolving, just like you as humans are always becoming and evolving. I am not one thing. I am many things. Don't limit me. The Torah goes on to tell its readers to try not to limit this power, this eheyeh, to any one image. Don't make statues or images of things in nature and think that they can somehow define the ultimate, the invigorating power that lies behind and within this world of ours. So the challenge became for our ancestors how to represent their experiences of the divine in words, because images were prohibited. How did they do it? Through metaphors. God was and always has been a metaphor. And the challenge for us today is to find the metaphors that fit us. The goal for us is to articulate those moments, those experiences that feel transcendent, holy, dare we say godly in our lives. Over the summer, we held a sermon discussion workshop on the topic of God. Anyone from Zarua could attend, and the questions posed were these very questions with which I've been grappling. Does God exist? Do you believe in God? How would you describe God or the godly? It was an enlightening discussion attended by many of our Torah study regulars. There were so many pearls shared, and I'd like to share a few of these with you now, the Torah of our Zarua members in response to the question, who is God to you? When do you experience God? How do you describe God? Reb Arnie Feldman shared that, quote, God is when we transcend and decenter ourselves. God is about moving away from our ego. God is overcoming our sense of self-importance. The experience of people's goodness is the experience of the divine. The yearning to feel whole, to feel connected to others and to oneself is the experience of the divine. The yearning to understand the workings of the world, which are beyond our control, is a yearning for the divine. Sue Feldman shared, quote, God is hope. God is not meant for us to pin down. God is in the unknown. The most important concepts and experiences in our lives exist in the unknown and in paradox. And the concept of God clearly is both a paradox and in the realm of the unknown. Lisa Allen described God as power greater than each one of us as individuals, a power to which we turn when we can't do things alone. God is in the power of a group to lift us up when we are in need of support. God is in pregnancy and the experience of the creation of new life. Larry Serlin shared John Lennon's famous statement, God is a concept by which we measure our pain. And Larry also shared the famous saying, there are no atheists in foxholes, indicating that we turn to a concept of God in times of trouble and hardship, seeking some sort of comfort or relief. Elliot Kolb shared that he sees God in the blend of the world of creative energy and the scientific world. Nancy Lee Berge shared, God is in interconnections, and that, as Rabbi Mark Margolius taught, when we are in need, God sends us people. Nina Schaefer shared that God is in the moments of gratitude when we are spared from something terrible befalling us, and that God is often our partner as we navigate the challenges of life. Nina adds, God is there to argue with as well. Natalie Landros shared that God is in the rules that guide us for living a moral and ethical life. Phyllis Jacobs shared that God is in the lines that connect us, in the weave of holy relationships between us. Janet Neufeld, Ozzy friend and author of our Alternative Kaddish, shared that God is in the miracle, mystery, and magic that we experience in life. And as Torah states, God is often with us, standing in this place, yet we do not even know that God is here. And finally, Mendel Grossman reminded us of the famous adage, describing God as a fool's errand, because, as Mendel always maintains, God is that which cannot be put into words. So now that you have heard some of our Or Zarua friends and fellow congregants, how they've described their God concept and God moments, how would you describe God, the God moments in your life? The experiences that feel transcendent, connecting, spiritual, even holy. Don't worry about the traditional views of God with which you were raised. Let them go. Let them all go. Those limited and limiting images of your youth. Let them go. They were all metaphors created long, long ago. Images of God were, are, and always will be metaphors for the experience of living as humans in both an uncertain and glorious world. Do you find God in nature, in community? Do you find God in supporting a friend who is sick or who has just lost a loved one? Do you find God in providing help for those who are underserved? Or do you find God in advocating for the rights of those who are sidelined and marginalized? When are your God moments? I share with you a poem that I wrote a few years back in one of our Or Zarua pre-high holiday poetry workshops with Kathy Cohen, our teacher and guide. It came from my heart then, and I think it still expresses my thoughts and feelings today. Dear God, source of resilience, I'm struggling, God, struggling to incorporate you into my life. I feel that you are there, for I know that there is a greater force that exists in the world, but I can't grasp you or hold you. You can't get my work done or cure illness or stop violence. But why not? I thought you were all powerful. No, the best I can hope for is that I can turn to you in my times of despair, confusion, overwhelm. The best I can hope for is that you know me well enough to tap me, to remind me of my resilience. Oh God, are you real or aspirational? Do we as humans need a God in our lives, a comfort, a loving friend who reminds us that we were born with a pure soul, with strength, with courage, and with inner resilience? I think so. I think people need God, and I hope, God, that you are there. Gamar Chatima Tova, may you find your metaphors for the godly in your life, the experiences of life that are so powerful that you can't even put them into words. Shana Tova.